through promise number 3. So far, they have carried out, in addition to this intense, according to the Hebrew media, wave and phase number 14, which did include many high-leveled missiles and, of course, ballistic and drones. Well, with that, let's go ahead and see the latest casualties. According to the Israeli media, despite the blackout, we do have 24 dead, 838 injured, and nearly 5,000 settlers have been evacuated from their settlements. And according to the latest statistics from the Hebrew media, just the 14th wave did result in several killed and at least 137 others injured and were hospitalized. Well, with that, let's go ahead and bring in our guest for this part of the rolling coverage, Mr. Tony Gosling, investigative journalist, joining us there from Bristol. I'd like to thank you very much, Mr. Gosling, for joining us during this ongoing rolling coverage.
Hi, thank you.
Thank you. Well, let's go ahead and get started with it in general, and then we're going to go ahead and move in little by little. Mr. Gosling, I mean, just let's talk about this 14th wave that the Israeli entity actually faced a large amount of aftermath, this destruction, this damage, not only on a lot of its buildings, but we did see specifically that a very sensitive Israeli military and intelligence facility was directly hit. The shock wave did hit the building next to it, which just happened to be the Soroka Hospital, which has been treating IUF soldiers since the beginning, not of only just this war, but wars previously. It also did hit the Israeli Stock Exchange building in east of Tel Aviv. Mr. Gosling, when we woke up this morning here in Iran, or no matter where anyone else is in the world, and we saw this amount of destruction, how would you describe what we have seen till now, as we are now on day 7, and how much is the situation, this tension, actually evolving?
Well, it's difficult to say too much from the UK, but you can see what the Israelis are saying on social media themselves. What they are pointing out is that seriously, the most important of the Israeli military facilities have been deliberately sited next to, in this case, a military hospital. So the idea is, of course, that they're using these casualties in the hospital as a human shield. Now, it's not me saying that. This is Israeli citizens themselves saying this. So, as usual, the Israelis are doing exactly what they're accusing others of doing. So when they bomb a hospital in Gaza, they say, oh, this is right next to or underneath it is a Hamas command center. That's actually been proven again and again to be a lie. But actually what they're doing is something very similar. So every time you get an accusation out of the Israeli public relations machine, the press people, the ambassadors around the world, etc., what you seem to be getting is actually a confession from them as to what their tactics are. It's very important to understand how this, it's not just a simple lie. This is a very well thought through and well understood tactic of psychological warfare. But it's more than that. It's what's called accelerationism. Accelerationism is a way of accelerating crises, and this is one of the things that accelerationists do, is they just accuse the other side of doing what they're doing. The idea is to try and get ahead of people's understanding of what's going on, and to confuse people. In fact, in many cases, to get people to switch off. What you found, I think, right across the world, certainly here, my friends in the UK, is they find it difficult, particularly to have followed this year and a half of genocide in Gaza, because they find the coverage of it is just so inaccurate sometimes, but also, of course, it's a repulsive story. The place is being turned into a slaughterhouse. And so this is part of the game that they're playing, and it really is, I think, a game with our minds to drive us away from to actually really understanding because if you remember back in the time of the Iraq invasion, the illegal Iraq invasion back in 2003 with Tony Blair and George Bush, both of who are still walking the streets, even though they really should be in jail or possibly even executed for that crime of the invasion of Iraq. Scott Ritter, the UN's weapons inspector and US Marine Corps, I think he was an intelligence officer, wasn't he? Maybe a colonel. He said that they were putting the intelligence before the policy before the intelligence. So they were fitting the intelligence around the policy. So what's happening is here they are fitting the understanding and the rationale of this war of aggression against Iran that's been launched from Tel Aviv. They're putting that around, fitting it around the action that they're taking. So they're making decisions to do something, and then they're basically scrabbling around to try to find some way to justify it. So no rational person will do that. No rational person decides what to do before they've decided why they want to do what they want to do. So people rationally, and normal people like you and I, what we do is we think about a situation and then we decide what to do. What they're doing is totally the opposite, and this turns everybody off. It's part of the game of psychological warfare that they're playing. But I think the main point to make here is that this war of aggression launched by the Israelis at the end of last week is that really the purpose of it is nothing to do with the nuclear program, which is very much in dispute. Tulsi Gabbard, of course, the Director of National Intelligence in the United States, has said there is no nuclear evidence of a nuclear program, weapons program in Iraq. In Iran, as have you just mentioned the International Atomic Energy Authority also saying that this doesn't exist. But that's not the point. The point is they want to shift the attention of the world's press away from what's happening in Gaza, because what's happening in Gaza is absolutely horrifying, seriously horrifying. And anyone that's focusing on that, in fact, some of the commentators here in the British media, on Sky, for example, yesterday was saying this, that the horrors of Gaza are so. I mean, particularly what we've got is starvation. This has had a big effect on British public opinion over the last 3 or 4 months. The slow starvation of the people since the end of the so-called ceasefire. So that's one big factor, starvation. Also, the fact that you've got medics over there who are treating 100 or so casualties a night, seeing 100 or so people dying every day, trying to get hold of aid. But also the fact that we've now developed this US-Israeli aid program, which has been so appalling. Well, I mean, basically what they're doing is they're creating rat traps. So they're saying, you're starving, if you want something to eat, you can come over here, and then they're shooting them and killing them. So this is really some of the worst behaviour, I think, that we've ever seen in the history of humanity. So the point,
well, exactly.
I think...
Mr. Gosling, yeah. I mean, I'm sorry to cut you off there. It just happens to be that now that you're talking about how the Zionist entity, how Trump and everyone tries to justify their actions, coincidentally and interestingly, Netanyahu currently is making some statements. I just want to read a few of them off. He's saying that if we bring down Iran, all support for Hamas will collapse, and this will bring back the kidnapped soldiers. He continues by saying, we will achieve all the war's objectives, such as eliminating the missile and nuclear threat, destroying Hamas and Iran, and returning again the kidnapped soldiers. So now this is his reason for attacking Iran, not only to so-called overthrow the regime that he was mentioning before, regime change, not only to destroy the so-called nuclear sites, but now that if we destroy Iran, Hamas is going to disappear and we're going to get our soldiers back. Your take on this?
Well, look, the only threat in the Middle East from nuclear weapons is from him. He is the threat. Netanyahu has what we believe is at least 200 nuclear weapons. Many of them, by the way, supplied by the French who cooperated in the 1950s, 60s and 70s to help the Israelis develop their own nuclear weapons. And you very, very rarely hear any mention of this over in the West, even though it's a very well-known fact since the Sunday Times front page in the 1980s, 1986, I think it was, where the Israeli nuclear weapons program was revealed to the world in a Rupert Murdoch's newspaper, who's now vehemently pro-Israel. So he'd only just taken over the Sunday Times then. But I mean, of course, he's going to say all these things, getting rid of Hamas. I mean, this is a joke. We have a prosecution going on, which is getting a fantastic amount of support from the British people of the kneecap singers who have made some, I think it was waving a Hamas flag or something that they did on one of their concerts. They're supporting the Palestinians, but the idea is that if you even mention Hamas, you're some sort of terrible person. What Netanyahu's trying to do is he's trying to eliminate the support for the Palestinians. He thinks that it's just Hamas. Actually, it's nothing really to do with Hamas. There is a fantastic, although Hamas is one part of it, and maybe not the best part, but the point is that you cannot eliminate this faction. What's happening, exactly as happened in Northern Ireland in the struggles here in the 1970s and 1980s and 90s here in Britain, was that as the tactics became more draconian against the Irish Republicans, the IRA and Sinn Féin, the greater their support became. And so I think he knows this. He's just trying to shift the goalposts. To be honest, I think he's much more concerned about his own political survival in Israel than he is about eliminating Hamas, because he knows that he just simply cannot do that. And by the way, he is on the record as funding Hamas because he wanted to stop the previous Yasser Arafat's previous group, which was a secular group. It wasn't specifically Islamic. And of course, that's the thing that they want to do, is they want to frame this as a Jewish-Islamic battle. Of course, it's nothing of the sort. Most importantly, Zionism is a horrific heresy of Judaism. It's saying that because God is taking too long to do what we want, we're going to pick up guns and even nuclear weapons, and we're going to do it. Now, that is not part of the Torah at all. In fact, it's overturning the Torah. And so to try and frame this as a religious war is exactly what they're doing, exactly the same as what they did actually in Northern Ireland. They tried to frame it as a Protestant versus Catholic conflict. It was nothing of the sort. It was a settler colonialist. The Unionists, the Loyalists were actually what you would call Puritans, or very forceful financial group. Freemasonry, the Orange Order, was also involved in starting that war, which was started by Lord Carrington when he was Defence Secretary. But so there are a lot of parallels, and in fact, what you'll find is that the Irish Republicans, the Irish people, many of them, and the politicians in Ireland understand very, very well this tactic, because it was used against them by the British during the Northern Ireland Troubles, which saw the deaths of many hundreds of people. But this, of course, is a far more dangerous conflict, as it could get much worse. I think we also have to understand that this whole business of the nuclear weapons and Iran nuclear weapons. I don't know whether Iran has nuclear weapons or not. I'm not in a position to tell you, but I can say the evidence is that they don't. So these are myths. What we're getting is, we're not getting rational journalism or any kind of investigative journalism. We're just getting myth peddling. And of course, you mentioned in your bulletin there about the other forms of warfare: cyber warfare, space warfare, economic warfare. This form of hybrid warfare and psychological warfare is the way that they intend to win. But I don't think that they actually really have a cat in hell's chance of winning, because public opinion around the world has swung 100% really against Israel. There's very little here in Britain. It's a very, very small minority that support Israel, but they all seem to appear on television day after day, these people. And of course, we still have a mass movement right across the country. Even in small towns in rural Gloucestershire, you will see regular protests out on the street by ordinary people who are protesting against this.
And Mr. Gosling, I mean, when people, this is one of the biggest questions that people keep asking is how long can the Zionist entity pursue this front, this war imposition on the Islamic Republic of Iran? With it, we do have to, of course, bring in their best friend, basically, their top ally, which is the U.S. And Netanyahu actually did speak about them a bit just moments ago in his statement. He said, "We appreciate the United States participation in defending Israel." He said, "We appreciate every decision President Trump makes. We have never had a better friend than Trump, and we appreciate every decision he makes. As for us, we will defend ourselves with all our might." And he's continuing his conversation about how they've been targeting locations in Iran, etc., etc. When it comes to the Israeli entity, when it comes to its relation, its backing, it whether financial, whether militarily, whether boots on the ground, aircraft, no matter what we're talking about, the U.S. has always been there. And now this is a big question mark. Will the U.S. We already know that they have already they've already been backing Israel, but will they actually interfere with warplanes over the skies of Iran, bombing, and will they actually assist in the one thing that Zionist Netanyahu has been asking for, is destroying the Fordow nuclear plant?
Well, when you're referring to the United States, who do you mean by they? Who is making this decision?
Exactly.
You see, this is the question, and it's not necessarily going to be the American people, is it? Even though they've just had a newly elected president who said he was going to sort out the whole Middle East conflict. Well, maybe what he really meant when he said that was that he wanted to come in with Israel in a war. But he didn't tell the people that to wipe out any opposition to Israel in the Middle East. Well, that, of course, would be a world war. Now, he's in a bit of a problem. Let me tell you who I think is making this decision in the United States. It's mainly, as I said, a policy and an action that has been decided. It's been desired for many, many years. Even if you go back to 1975, you will watch an excellent film, an Academy Award-winning film, with Robert Redford, directed by Sidney Pollack, called The 3 Days of the Condor. Fantastic film about the CIA and the deep state in the United States, where they say, do you intend to invade the Middle East? Now, that's 1975, but it goes back even further, I would argue, to the 1870s with Albert Pike and his letter to Mazzini over in Italy, where he talks about 3 world wars. The First World War would be to clear out the Ottoman Empire from Palestine. The Second World War to start the Zionist entity state, which of course happened in 1948. And a Third World War between Zionism and the Islamic world. Now, the idea of this program was to create the biggest phony religious war the world had ever seen. So I think it goes back a long time, the push for the belief in this. And so as I was talking about Iraq, so the idea is you've made a decision, a secret decision, behind closed doors, in smoke-filled rooms, where you have decided you want to do this, but you've then got to sell that to the public, or you've got to announce it. And so you have to come up with all sorts of excuses or reasons to do what you're not explaining to people, what the real purpose of what it is. And so the people who are doing that, of course, are the Central Intelligence Agency, the deep state in the United States. They are very powerful and extremely well-funded organisations like the Council on Foreign Relations in the United States, and it's a private organisation which is a foreign policy think tank, and also the Royal Institute for International Affairs, Chatham House in London, all very, very similarly aligned and all totally private. People who work at these various institutions and are funded are all selected because they are on a gravy train. They are all wanting to see regime change in Iran, otherwise they won't be in those institutions. But the money is pouring into those places. So that's, I think, where most of these decisions are being made. Of course, they have a similar system in Brussels to make sure that everybody who is appointed, not elected, to the European Commission is also on the same programme. And so I think that's hopefully answers your question about who's actually going to decide these things, because Donald Trump obviously is cheering for them, but they have got to get this through the democratic process, the democratic system. Otherwise, everyone can see this is just another illegal war. Maybe not illegal in international law terms, because the United Nations, it doesn't seem has really got its act together yet, but certainly illegal in US terms, because the Congress has to vote through some action like this. Trump seems to want to do it all on his own. He thinks because he's president, he and his deep state friends can just do what they want. But actually, that's not how it works in a real democracy. So this, of course, is a massive test for US democracy. Israel is always crowing about how we are a democracy. Well, I beg to differ with that, because the Israeli Knesset, for example, he has all ultimate power, Netanyahu, but he's on a very, very fragile coalition. Last Thursday, there were votes which could have ended the coalition and actually forced a general election in Israel. So he's on a very, very fragile footing. Is old Netanyahu. So that, I think, it shows that the democracy is starting to fall apart in Israel. And also, of course, in the United States, if Trump tries to force this through, military support, without the approval either of the American people, who are very much against this, or Congress, then he's putting the United States in a constitutional crisis. In fact, he could even institute a civil war in his own country if he tries to force this through. So who is he really working for? Who is he working for? I think we also...
Mr. Gosling, yes, with that, I do want to ask you a bit, because our time is running down. I do want to ask you, when it comes to this situation, we do have the G7 the other day, actually, at the end of their meeting, are the ones that they decided that after all of this and discussion and the facts and the evidence in front of them, they decided that it's Israel that has the right to defend itself. As an investigative journalist, Mr. Gosling, I mean, this is your expertise, your professional opinion, of course. How would you see, not just the G7, but other nations across the world, the silence from many international communities and the continuation for defending the Zionist entity by saying that it's Israel's right to defend itself and not Iran's?
Well, this is accelerationism again, isn't it? Turning the truth on its head. Israel has no right to defend itself when it's occupying land and the Palestinians try to take that land back. Israel has no right of so-called self-defense because it's occupied that land. All the land in Palestine has a legal status under international law. And the land that the Israelis have occupied in 1948, 1967, Six-Day War, and the October War in 73, which forced the big oil crisis around the world, these pieces of land are Palestine. They're not Israel. So there is no right of so-called self-defense. And what they're saying is that the Israel has a right to self-defense when they are launching a war of aggression against another country. Again, these are not just lies, they're accelerationist lies. You have to understand the Dark Enlightenment. This is a philosophy where this kind of thing is used as a way to poison debate and to control the narrative. They try to anyway, because they try also to control the press. But behind all of this is this fevered ideology of Christian Zionism. This is enormous in the United States, and it goes back to roughly the same time as the letter I was talking about, the 1870s, with Nelson Darby and his Schofield Bible. The idea is that everything that Israel does is right. And there are quotes that are equivalent to that in the Old Testament, as we Christians call it. But the Christian Zionism is a total perversion of the truth. And if you want to really get an understanding, I noticed the guy that Rupert Murdoch and Fox News sacked a couple of years ago for telling the truth, by the way, Tucker Carlson, has done a very interesting interview with Ted Cruz. I'm sure you've seen it, where he explains really the maniacal aspect of this Christian Zionism. And when I listen to him, what I hear is exactly the same sort of fevered, maniacal arguments that were used here in the English Civil War by the Puritans, by Oliver Cromwell, who said it's the Christian thing to do to chop off the head of the Christian king. So the Puritans in Britain were going around smashing up parts of churches and saying they were doing it for God. We saw the same sort of thing with ISIS, destroying the sacred old ancient religious sites. So this version of the faiths is what they call a Gnostic faith. So it's not really anything to do with the original scriptures or sentiments of the Abrahamic faiths. What they're doing is they're inventing new heretical strands of these religions which have got no basis in real facts in order to destroy those religions. And that's what they're really up to. And that's what's driving, I think, a lot of the pressure in the United States deep state and within politics to pursue a war of aggression against Iran, is this Christian Zionist heresy. And it must be understood to understand that most Christians don't believe this, certainly not in Britain. It's very, very few that go for that. But it's a poisonous version of Christianity, just as ISIS is a poisonous version of Islam and Zionism is a poisonous version of Judaism.
Yes, well, Mr. Gosling, with that point, we have around 2 more minutes. If you could briefly, how long do you expect the situation to continue, and to what extent do you think it will escalate?
Well, look, I think it's going to be a bit like the Mark Sloboda mentioned. I remember right at the very beginning of 2022 of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, actually because the Ukrainian army was about to attack the Donbass region, the Russian-speaking region, which was independent and had voted for independence, a massive majority, by the way. So that's I think what's going. Mark Sloboda said this. Everyone was saying, even Scott Ritter said, "Oh, it'll be about 2 or 3 weeks. This will last." No, said Mark. This is not going to finish. This one really is going to carry on and on. And I get the same sense about the attack on Iran last week, that this is the beginning of a much, much wider Middle East conflict. I think the Israelis are particularly confident. They feel that they've been successful through the war in Ukraine in keeping the Russians pinned down up in Ukraine and away and out of the Middle East, because the Russians, of course, have been in the Soviet Union, a very big force in the Middle East for many decades, particularly since the Second World War. And the end of the regime in Syria, I think, is down to the Russians considering that their threat from Ukraine is much more important than them keeping a presence in Syria. And so now the Russians are out of the game, for the most part, at the moment anyway, in the Middle East. It seems pretty obvious to me that they're going to pursue this and pursue it as long as it takes. And that means potentially bringing in the United States. It means potentially bringing in China and Russia into a wider Middle East war. Well, that's not good news, but ultimately all I'll say is that it's a war that the Zionist aggressors and the United States deep state cannot win. It's impossible for them to win it. As many of the wars, like Vietnam, for example, they have embarking on these and they cannot win them. So humanity needs to wake up and oppose this absolutely right now.
Definitely. Well, Mr. Tony Gosling, I'm so sorry, Gosling, excuse me. Our time has run out. Investigative journalist there joining us from Bristol.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, viewers, thank you very much for watching this part of the ongoing rolling coverage. Again, day 7 of the Israeli imposed war on the Islamic Republic of Iran. Please follow us on Telegram.